Remember when Big Brother was a thing back then? And I'm speaking for how big the show was in Mexico. It was a reality show that became a sensation in the early 2000s. It was about a bunch of random participants that were trapped inside a house. They were called by a voice judge named Big Brother. Who was Big Brother? We never knew. All we knew is the participants were under surveillance 24/7, exposing us their most scandalous, most intimate, and most embarrassing moments to the world. Secrets would be revealed and dramas would be unleashed. The only way they could get eliminated was by being voted out by the people watching them on television, depending how big of a jerk he or she was, and the last person left in the house would win. As a whole, the show was an excuse for horny people to get famous. But where did this idea of a mysterious Big Brother who spies on people's privacies come from? The answer is George Orwell's 1984. Based on a book about a dystopian future where censorship and surveillance is enforced to the people by a totalitarian government. In the book as well as in the movie, Big Brother is a mysterious face of the party that no one has seen. All they know is that he watches every move the people make in order to keep them on check. The book is like a lecture step on how to become a dictator for dummies. It is often regarded as a cautionary tale about what would happen if democracy was taken over by a tyrannical government. In 2006, V for Vendetta caught the attention of many for its similarities towards 1984. They're both dystopian futures with a dictatorship under control, except one has a superhero vigilante in it. Regardless, that doesn't diminish its value. Even though the author for V for Vendetta, Alan Moore, has never mentioned George Orwell as an inspiration, it almost looks like a sequel to 1984, as if it belongs in the same world of Orwell. They both carry the same ideals of how you get into power, how you abuse that power, and how revolutions lead to more corrupted power. Orwell's book hit a nerve to our dystopian fantasy because it could represent our reality. After all, the book is inspired by his first-hand experience with World War II. Orwell was at first involved in the Spanish Civil War against its fascist government, and was later a big supporter of the Russian Revolution, until this revolution morphed into the tyrants they were fighting against, leading to the rise of a bigger tyrant, Joseph Stalin. This would also inspire Orwell to write books that satire and warn how dictatorships function and are established in a progressive era. With Animal Farm and 1984, Alan Moore has been critically acclaimed as a comic book writer for his dark, pessimistic depiction of superheroes in Watchmen, The Killing Joke, V for Vendetta, and so on. Moore was at first inspired to write V as a form of protest on the rise of the National Front in the UK, a form of fascist extreme right wings in the mid-1980s. And he would be notorious for not wanting to get credit for his story adaptations into the movies, because of political reasons and his dislike of Hollywood's depiction of his stories, also for his dislike of our modern superhero genre. Regardless, whether as books or movies, they've been a cultural impact in our world, affecting our language as 1984 did with the usage of Big Brother, Doublethink, Thought Police, and V for Vendetta shaping the image of what anarchy and protest look like today, and how hacker trolls want to look like today. To be honest, I was hoping to release this video until November. You know, so I could do the November. But with the current state that the world is in right now, I thought it would be fitting to notice a few relevancies that these movies might carry in our present day. So, hope you don't mind me grieving you just a little bit as I ask you, 1984, V for Vendetta. What did they have in common? Dictators are watching you! But before I talk about these movies, I wanted to clarify a few things about this word. When it comes to describing a dictatorship, we often use such words very loosely like socialism, communism, authoritarianism, fascism, and totalitarianism, when in reality, not all of these words refer to a dictatorship. So I'm gonna try the best I can to clarify these words, just so we don't get confused whenever someone throws at them randomly. If you don't mind me boring you, feel free to skip at this time. Out of these 5 words, the first 2, socialism and communism, have a positive connotation. Socialism is a social and economic doctrine that calls for public rather than private ownership or control of property and natural resources. According to the socialist view, individuals do not live or work in isolation, but live in cooperation with one another. Communism is a system based around the theory of economic equality and advocates for a classless society. So in theory, these terms are supposed to bring equality socially and economically. There are forms of anti-capitalism that does not exploit the workers or the product. If anything, these terms sound more utopian than dystopian. As much as these terms have well-meaning intentions, that doesn't mean they can't be twisted into dictatorships. Venezuela right now is supposed to be a socialist party and yet is considered a dictatorship under Maduro. Russia is a communism and yet is considered a dictatorship under Vladimir Putin. Cuba is also communist, and since Fidel Castro was in power until his death, it was also considered a dictatorship. China is a communist party, and since World War II, they've been a dictatorship, but they could be described more as an authoritarianism. It is characterized as a strong central government with limited degree of political freedom. So as much as countries like China or Cuba enforce their authority, use surveillance, or strictly censor the internet to the people like Google or Facebook, they still grant a few freedoms to the people. However, the next terms are more extreme and more dangerous. Fascism is characterized by the imposition of dictatorial power, government control of industry and commerce, and the forcible suppression of opposition, often at the hands of a military or a secret police force. Totalitarianism is a form of government in which the state's power is unlimited and controls virtually all aspects of public and private life. This control extends to all political and financial matters as well as attitudes, morals, and beliefs of the people. So from these 5 words, the first 2 supposedly grant freedom, one of them grants a little freedom, and the last 2 remove all freedom and are considered as dictatorships. The only difference between those terms is fascism are baby steps towards a mature totalitarianism. Let's say if a democratic nation starts adopting ideals that represent a dictator like inequality, the leader holding his position of power for so long, discrediting freedom of press and speech that does not comply with their party, those are the initiations of fascism. When Hitler's ideals were getting popular in Germany, you can say those were the initiations of democracy morphing into fascism. Once Hitler became chancellor and enforced the Nazi ideals of a supreme race, that's when fascism evolved into a totalitarianism. Dictatorships focus on one man having control over everyone. Totalitarianism is a group of people, one party, having full power over everyone's rights. So let's say if we were in a quarantine and we were being under surveillance to stay at home, does that count as being in a dictatorship? No! It really doesn't matter what name of the party is. It can be socialist, democratic, or republican. It really doesn't matter. The moment the party starts controlling what can we say, what can we not say, those are the first symptoms of a dictatorship. In the world of 1984 and V for Vendetta, it is governed by a totalitarian form of government. In their movies, the people are under surveillance, art and literature that does not favor the party is censored, information is either distorted or erased. Both stories are viewed from an ordinary person's point of view. They both attempt to rebel against their party, they get caught, and are tortured instead. But while for E.B. it was a process that made her stronger, for Winston, it was a process that defeated him. Oh, and John Hurt appears in both movies. I've already mentioned how dictatorships start in my Hunger Games and Metropolis video, but for the sake of this one, let me re-mention them again. First step towards a dictatorship, there must be a catastrophic event. An event can be war, terrorism, natural disaster, or a plague that causes an amount of casualties and affects us financially. In 1984, their catastrophe was war. In the book, the nuclear war divided the whole world into 3 superstates: East Asia, Eurasia, and Oceania, where the story takes place. In V for Vendetta, the catastrophe happens when a virus spreads, causing thousands of lives and putting everyone under quarantine surveillance. Once the catastrophe has changed our way of living, then follows fear. Media selling pandemic in a way that fuels people's emotions into fear, anger, and paranoia towards this threat coming to get them, whether it's terrorism or a virus.
Fueled by the media, fear and panic spread quickly, fracturing and dividing the country until at last the true goal comes into view.
Once we're consumed by desperation, our common sense becomes clouded, and now we're ready to listen to any stupid idea that promises the end of this threat. Finally, the third step goes as follows. It's time to elect a leader.
Fear got the best of you, and in your panic you turned to the now High Chancellor Adam Sutler.
This leader may look like he understands the needs of the people and might even get rid of this threat. He might even have had good intentions at first, but in reality is a man who takes advantage of the catastrophe. He plays off to the fears of the people only to get to power. That's how Joseph Stalin and Hitler rose into power, by playing into the stress that people were feeling at that moment. In V for Vendetta, once the villain gets into power, he grants the cure for the virus, when in reality, his party caused the virus in order to get to power.
And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance.
Now the difference between both movies is V for Vendetta focuses on these three patterns in how to start a dictatorship, whereas 1984 focuses on the aftermath. Since it's already a dictatorship, how do you maintain it that way? Most dictatorships, if not all of them, have slogans that represent them. 1984 is no different, as the three slogans of the party can also be three ways on how dictatorships remain in power. The three slogans are as well contradicting statements. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength.
War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength.
These contradictions are what you call doublethink. Doublethink means the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them. This is a form of cult-like brainwash. If you're fully devoted to your leader or party, you will accept everything they say as truth, despite its contradictions. If they say 2 + 2 = 5, not only must you believe it, you must know it to be true.
Do you remember writing in your diary, freedom is the freedom to say 2 + 2 = 4? How many fingers am I holding up, Winston?
4.
And if the party says there are not 4, but 5, then how many?
5.
In some extreme measures, this form of brainwash can work through propaganda or physical and psychological torture. Power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing. War is peace means the constant need for war.
The war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous.
When there is war, people feel like they must support their country because of patriotism, whether it's the people investing in the war, joining the war, or giving up their sexual lives for their attention to Big Brother. This prevents the people from being self-aware of the real problem because they're blinded to their patriotism or becoming war heroes. If there is a non-ending war, the people will support their party at war and the party will be at peace with the people, since no one would dare to protest against patriotism. And those that do are considered traitors or unpatriotic.
In principle, the war effort is always planned to keep society on the brink of starvation.
Ignorance is strength means the destruction of the belief that all men are socially equal. This implies on demoting the middle class into low-class poverty, while the high class remain rich permanently. Because the low class struggle to survive, they have no time to learn or receive knowledge. Therefore, they become ignorant of what's happening in the world, while their party gets stronger because no one can oppose them.
A hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance.
This can also apply on changing and erasing history, even removing words from the dictionary, so the people, even through speech, sound ignorant, and their protests may not be as impactful.
It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. You won't have seen the dictionary, 10th edition yet, Smith? It's that thick. The 11th edition will be that thick.
I remember how the meaning of words began to change, how unfamiliar words like collateral and rendition became frightening. I remember how different became dangerous.
Freedom is slavery means to make the people dependent of the party. The purpose is to scare them off into not leaving the party. If they lived independently, they would be slaves to their own freedom because they can't survive in their own strength. If they rely on the party, then all their needs will be taken care of. According to this slogan, in order to live free and peaceful, you must be slaves to the party.
I want everyone to remember why they need us.
As a sum up, these three slogans are psychological tactics to trap the human mind into submission. The people are meant to be kept poor and ignorant, they're meant to be fearful of not leaving the party, and they're meant to support the party during times of war. Which in this case, war is permanent. And what's scary about this is people can live under a dictatorship and not know it. People can renounce their freedoms willingly and welcome tyranny into their lives not knowing what they have done. But what about those that do know what's behind the scenes? What about those that take extreme measures? So, some of you might wonder what was the point of adding B into this conversation when all I'm talking about is that damn book? Well, I was just getting right there. Once dictators abuse their power and oppress their people, then follows revolution. The time for the people to revolt and overthrow their government. If you look at both symbols from each movie, they represent two opposite sides that collide with one another. It's tyranny versus anarchy, as symbolized with their faces. If Big Brother's image represents complete control and obedience, B's mask represents rebellion and protest to any authority. They're not necessarily humanized, as everything about them is ambiguous. They're just meant to represent the ideal beliefs of each group.
Beneath this mask, there is more than flesh. Beneath this mask, there is an idea, Mr. Creedy.
We don't know who Big Brother is, just like we don't know who B is. What is his name? What was he like after being burned? What does he look like without the mask? All we know is Big Brother is blindly worshipped by the people, and all we know about B are his extreme revolutionary ideals. But out of the two, B seems to be the most humanized. He's charming and philosophical, he's a gentleman and theatrical, he falls in love in the end, and is a real dork when it comes to sword fighting. But trying to make us root for him made it more confusing since not everyone knew how to feel about B for his violent methods. Was he a hero, an anti-hero, a villain? Much of the confusion was due to its political timing when it came out, which might have been considered as inappropriate. Now, put yourself back in post 9/11. We're supposed to identify B as a hero who uses terrorist attacks by blowing up a building in London a year prior to an actual terrorist attack in London of 2005. You see why some would have a hard time labeling him as a hero, or at least as an anti-hero? Now, even though I haven't read the comic book, I heard that he's much more ruthless and bloodthirsty than in the movie. Most of B's tactics, as well as the look of his costume, are actually inspired by the look of Guy Fawkes, a historical figure who shows up at the opening of the movie. He was an extreme Catholic who tried to destroy the parliament on the 5th of November, due to the monarchy being passed down to Protestant kings. That's where the famous poem comes from.
Remember, remember the 5th of November.
B was also shaped by Alan Moore's ideals, considered for being an occult magician and an anarchist. His ideals don't actually condone violence, but for him, anarchy means to be your own master, free from anyone telling you what to do and what to think.
That everybody should be the master of their own destiny. Everybody should be their own leader.
While I can get behind in some parts of it, the idea of blowing up a parliament so the people of London can govern themselves from now on is dangerous. People are monsters, and without some form of set rules governing them, it would be chaos on the streets, or as it's put, anarchy.
The whole city's gone mad.
This is exactly what he wants.
What?
Anarchy in the UK!
The more I think of it, the closer he gets to being similar to Heath Ledger's Joker.
Introduce a little anarchy. upset the established order, and everything becomes chaos.
And as much as revolutions sound heroic, at the long run, they oftentimes end worse. The French Revolution first started with good intentions to overthrow their tyrants, until they gave up on their ideals and turned into the tyrants they fought against. Mao's China and Castro's Cuba fought for a revolutionary utopian socialist party, until they too turned into dictators. The Russian Revolution is a prime example that inspired George Orwell to write Animal Farm. How revolutions first start with good intentions for the working class, only to end far worse than before. And Orwell would make it clear that he's not a fan of revolutions in his 1984 book, since the last revolution he supported evolved into Stalin. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. So let me get a little more depressing. At the end of the movie, after B inspires the whole country to turn against their government in 1 year and set them free from their oppression, the revolution wins and they're now free from their dictators. What if they're not? What if a worse tyrant replaces their last tyrant? The ending is left open to hope for a better future. But what if this is just another case where you cut the head of the dragon only to be replaced by 3 more heads? If B's plan were to fail and start another dictatorship, then he's not a hero, he's a villain who doomed the country for a personal vendetta to what was done to him.
What was done to me was monstrous.
And they created a monster.
And what can make him seem more of a villain is that he uses the same tactics that dictators use to lure people: fear. His ideals only work through fear, not trust.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
It's like if he were the puppeteer, playing with London, using the people as dominoes. But if there's one aspect that redeems him, is that he knows he's morally corrupt. He's a product of the evils of totalitarianism and is willing to go down with the ship, as we all know who pulls the lever in the end.
What was done to me created me. It's a basic principle of the universe that every action will create an equal and opposing reaction.
So that would be one redeemable aspect that makes him an anti-hero. Still, his methods for a revolution are very dangerous for what could later lead in the long run. Then again, what do I know? Just look at the history, look at each ideal, compare them to our present time, and you be the judge. "1984 is often referred when someone in power crosses the line as in the book. The last time the book became relevant was after Donald Trump's inauguration for president. The book sold out several copies after many noticed the party's distortion of facts and dismissal of those who opposed Trump, just like Big Brother in the book. Recently, with what's been happening with the coronavirus, the book has regained some popularity for its dystopian themes and enforcement of surveillance as it is in our current state. B for Vendetta surprisingly has the most common likes to our current state with the virus, quarantine, surveillance to stay at home. If I had to make a recommendation, instead of watching Contagion or Outbreak, go watch or rewatch B for Vendetta. Despite its lack of action, it makes it up with its intriguing ideals and political tensions. You'll be glued to B's philosophical views about anarchy. After all, who can make anarchy sound more appealing than the Wachowski brothers, the screenplay writers of this movie who also brought us The Matrix? As for the 1984 movie, well, I recommend you read the book or listen to the audiobook on YouTube. The movie is okay at best. The dystopian atmosphere is haunting and there is some nice cinematography once in a while. But it's not very interesting to look at. The ideas are not fully fleshed out as in the book, and once the movie is done, it doesn't leave you impacted. You're not left with the horror of how terrible this world is as in the book. I'll even say I felt pretty bored for the most part. If I would have read the book in school and seen the movie after, I probably would have been falling asleep. I'll say this one good thing, at least it's better than the original movie from 1956. Now, if I can sound a little conspiracy theorist here, my only concern about this pandemic right now is, will there be someone who takes advantage of this crisis? And I'm not talking about the obvious ones who will exploit it for personal gain. I'm talking about those in power. Will there be someone in power who takes advantage of this catastrophe for more power? And from what it looks like, it seems so with China, Russia, Singapore, Iran, Vietnam, even Israel and other countries invading privacy and stealing personal information through our phones in order to track down the virus. Some would argue it's just a temporary evil, but in the long run, there will always be one or two that will undoubtedly cross the line for more power. And that's what it all comes down to. Power. Power to control as many as possible. Power is not the means, it is the end, as Orwell once put it. So the only thing that can resist this evil power for control is knowledge. Knowledge is power for the working class and the low class. Being aware and informed of what's happening in the world. And that's a knowledge that no one can take away from you. Until then, if you're being watched by Big Brother, always remember the 5th of November. Boy, that was stressing. I hope I don't lose my mind after finding out that I've been spied on by my phone. Or by my television. Or by my PS3. Or by my microwave. Is this watch listening to me right now? Do showers watch me when I'm taking a bath? Do they? So, have you read these stories? Did you not like the movies? What's your favorite dystopian story? Leave your thoughts on the comment section down below. And if this video didn't depress you that much, leave a like and subscribe for more content. Well guys, tune in next time because when I get back, I'll be making a simple quick review of these 5 movies. Because you know what? It's the return of Little Fishy Time! Little Fishy Time! What's that? You don't know? Oh, I'll tell you in the next video. Ciao.